All right, good evening. The time is 4:01, and I'd like to call this Facilities Committee meeting of the Belton Independent School District Board of Trustees to order. Do we have any public comments?
We do not.
There you go. All right, well, let's get right to it. So we're gonna review and discuss the following items, and the first, see Mr. Templeton here, so the first, we're gonna dive into our spring demographer report. Nat?
I have, you know Bob well enough. You've been talking to Bob for quite a few years here at Belton ISD, and so we're excited to have him here. I don't need to say anything else, but we'll turn it over to Bob and move forward from there.
Well, thank you. Well, good evening. It's our time for our spring report, and this has been a very challenging and interesting year. The challenge continues to be the housing market is just on fire. So, I mean, we're not seeing any slowdowns or changes in the housing market. We've got our spring report where we'll update the housing numbers for the district. We've also done an update to the enrollment projections and touch a little bit on the economy. The economic conditions are improving. The unemployment rates are continuing to go down, but I will say these unemployment rates are a little bit misleading because there's still a significant amount of the labor force that is not participating. So the unemployment rates really feel like they're in that 2% range because every industry is struggling to fill jobs. And this era is also being called the Great Resignation. And that's happened to us. In fact, one of our consultants that worked with Belton left, took another job, got a great pay increase, and she's now doing land acquisition for builders. And got a huge raise. No night meetings, so she's got 2 small children, so that was a huge deal for her. But it is affecting every industry. It's affecting education big time. It's the difficulty in filling substitute teachers, regular teachers, transportation, food service. This year, they're saying, is going to be the most difficult year that we've seen for hiring teachers. And so it's going to be a real challenge because we've seen an exodus from teachers leaving the industry. And we've got, retirements, and then we've got low numbers coming out of college. The millennials, they're all about the flexibility of hybrid work, and that is going to cause some challenges for the industry. Now, Belton, because you're such a destination district, I do think you're going to be it's still going to be a challenge, but I think you do have a leg up over some districts because you are such a premier destination district. The only challenge is, are the teachers going to be able to afford to live in Belton but there's going to be housing close by that wouldn't make it too challenging. That's a huge problem for Austin. Austin, the housing is so expensive in the whole region that it's very hard for teachers and police. A lot of the service industry folks can't afford to live in Austin. Now, the area is seeing some pretty good economic news. FedEx is building a facility. The city of Temple's been telling us for a couple of months there's about to be a huge announcement for another major employer moving to the Temple region. But overall, I think Temple's in a really strong position economically because of the location on I-35, because they just north of Austin, also Dallas-Fort Worth is up the road. I think this area is going to be an economic boom area because of its location, and the land is so much cheaper than what it is south of here. The overall statistics on the demographics, the total population has grown 40% since 2010. That's pretty insane, 40%. So you truly are one of the fastest growing regions in the state. The below age 19, which is just a real quick way to look to see what's happening at generally, the younger age, the school age bracket is up 26%. The household income is up about 28%. The number of households within the district is up almost 39%. Now, the housing is continuing to accelerate. The pricing is going up a little bit, but these are still really good pricing. It may seem like it's high for the people that live here, but compared to the region, the average price for a new home in Belton ISD is $277,000. That's going to be a real plus for the region. The average price For an existing home to sell within Belton is $235.
Wasn't
So,
it Jim that said our land person, it's $450 in Round Rock and $550 in Austin? So
yes.
that's why we're seeing so many folks be willing to drive.
And that's right, and with hybrid work, where they may not have to go in every day, if they're only going in 1 or 2 days a week, driving an hour is not a problem. And we're starting to see, the other thing that's happening is the jobs are moving into Georgetown. So, Georgetown is getting some industry, whereas before Georgetown was a bedroom community, but now because of the 130 toll road, you're already noticing some pretty major employers that are on the 130 in Georgetown. Well, when that happens, now you're less than 30 minutes away from being to portions of Belton. So I think the growth is just gonna keep moving north up out of Austin, and Temple, Belton, this region is really gonna be in a sweet spot. Now, the overview for housing, so here's your district. We've got 46 actively building subdivisions, there's 13 futures, there is groundwork underway on 1,500 lots. So 1,500 lots are about to be delivered. Those are being indicated by a red outline. So where you see a red outline, that's where the bulldozers and the earth moving equipment is on site, and they're pouring streets and getting those lots ready. 1,500 is a little more than a year's supply. So, but it does give you an indication that, we really are looking at very strong growth for the foreseeable future. Now, on the multifamily side, we're tracking several multifamily projects. The purple shaded areas are the apartments, multifamily, that are under construction. The aqua green, or that kind of turquoise green, are the future multifamily that are in the planning stages. But you can see, we've got multiple projects. They're mix of some townhomes and of some apartments. We've got 103 units currently under construction. We've got 413 that are in the planning stages. Now, 80 of those are age restricted, so they won't have any kids. But you do have some multifamily. Right now, the multifamily is lifestyle and not really going to generate a ton of kids.
Yeah, it's been our lowest generator of kids, hasn't it?
Yeah, multifamily is not a big generator. For you, it's single family.
Yeah.
Now, some of the highlights, this is Grace Landing, which has broken ground. It's up in the far north part of the district. It's 89 future lots. The groundwork is underway on all of the lots. Now, these will be higher price point homes. It's not too far from the lake, so lower yielding, but it'll probably take them several years to build through that 89 lots. Also in the north part of the district, but a little closer in, is North Point, 658 future lots. They're just delivered, or about to deliver 200 lots. First homes will be completed this fall. So fall, we will have some occupied homes out of North Point. Just to the south of there is Mesa Ridge, which is 425 future lots. The groundwork is underway on about 121 lots. And the home building should begin in the spring, so anytime now. First home's anticipated pretty much a year from now in May, June of 2022. That's a little bit off. You can see the image on the right is satellite imagery. We now have access to satellite imagery that's about 3 weeks old, and it gets updated every month. So we're able to use this satellite imagery to help us track and stay on top of developments.
Bob, when you say that's off just a little bit, maybe.
The timing, I think the timing of first homes anticipated May, June of 22.
You're saying it'll be a little later.
I think it's gonna be later than that.
Can you go back to that slide for 1 second too? Just to show, that's kind of, our back one. Our site, our Northgate site, as we call it, is right there to the east of the North Point Mesa Ridge there too. So we're setting about, just across the street from about 1,100 future sites on those two.
A couple weekends ago, I went the back way from my house to Temple, and I went back P Ridge and Old Waco Road.
Yeah. Yes.
I haven't been back there in a while. Wow, they're building houses in the ditches over there.
Everywhere.
Yes.
But you can see there's several hundred lots right in here that they're getting close to getting these ready. So they probably will be building homes here pretty soon.
So with this amount of deliverable lots that are coming up this year, is the swing gonna go back north for us for the next year as far as the faster growth, or are we still kind of balanced?
You're pretty balanced because of three creeks, Hubbard Branch.
Yeah, it's building
You know,
fast.
there's a good bit of stuff. There's also that stuff that's a little, right there outside the loop there.
Yeah.
And I've got some slides on those as well.
Yeah.
This is the stuff, this in here, West Canyon Trails. And, West Canyon Trails is about 174 lots. There were 6 homes under construction there. They've got 134 vacant developed lots. Next door, we've got the Ridge at Bell Meadows. They've got 87 vacant developed lots. There's a multifamily project there that's duplexes. The Ridge at Bell Meadows, and it should be completed, you know, in a few months. That's about 48 duplex units that are the Ridge at Bell Meadows. And then Hubbard Branch, they had 44 homes under construction when we did the research. And, you know, they're delivering the next phase, should be delivered this fall, 170 lots. Then they've got phase 3, which should be delivered in 2023. And they're building about 100 to 125 homes a year. So we put that with Three Creeks. That's some pretty strong activity in the south. It is pretty balanced between the two high school feeder patterns.
Hey, real quick, while we're talking about the South, I heard something the other day from a friend of mine that there's a possibility that the apartments out by Miller Heights are gonna be closed, that there's some movement. Have y'all heard anything about that?
Haven't heard, now, I heard that rumor when I first got here.
Okay.
I haven't heard anything about that since, so that's been a couple of years. Haven't heard a word about that, but I can do a little bit.
We can do some digging as well. What tends to happen with older apartment complexes, when the occupancy starts to drop, they will sometimes tear down and rebuild or do something different with it. So I see that mostly in urban areas. So I don't know if that would be the case, that would be happening here, but it is something that, if these are apartments that were from the 70s or 80s,
Yeah.
then they're getting 50 years old, and so therefore there could be reaching near the end of life for those buildings.
These are very dated.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that the person that said something about it was that it's kind of a hot spot for, you know, things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the city's been pushing with some government agency to try to maybe repurpose some of that.
Yeah. So here's Three Creeks, it's 1,500 total lots. There were 16 homes under construction, but that's the timing, so they're getting some new lots. So phase 8 with 42 lots delivered for home building, so they'll pick up speed. They are building about 125 to 150 homes a year. You can see on the picture on the right here, this is where their new sections are coming on. So they've got some new lots that will allow them to keep building that 125 to 150 homes a year. Now, I just touched on the highlights of the research. You know, here's kind of the big picture. We've got about 22 actively building subdivisions in the Lake Belton High School zone and about 929 available lots in the Lake Belton zone. There's 3,056 future lots in the Lake Belton zone. In the Belton High zone, we've got 23 actively building subdivisions with about 1,060 available lots. There's 3,300 future lots in the Belton, but it is amazing how even the building is between the two feeder patterns.
What about River Farms? How far are we off for them to have deliverable lots over there?
I do not recall. I'll have to double check on River Farms.
Last I heard, and so that's the other part in the south that I think is important, I heard they were moving very quickly.
They are.
Jim Bowles, our realtor, had been out looking around, and they're moving very quickly down there. So I think deliverables in the south in that Miller Heights region are gonna be important to watch as well. A couple of things, can you go back to the slide, I can't remember, it was right next to Chisholm Trail Elementary School, right there. So a couple of things, we have Southwest, South Belton Middle School, and then there's all that Chisholm Trail and its boundary over there. So the current bond proposal that has a consideration for a new elementary at Hubbard Branch one of the most important things that we can do is not only address overcrowding at Chisholm Trail now, which building at Hubbard Branch does by adding an additional 400 seats, but also plan for the future with the expansion of housing in the south at not only Hubbard Branch, but also at River Farms as well. So goal in that would be to relieve the overcrowding at Chisholm Trail by adding those 400 seats and the additional 100 seats at an addition at Southwest Elementary School. So gaining 500 elementary seats in the south between Miller Heights and Chisholm Trail Elementary School. I bring that up because I want to keep that in mind when we look at Bob's projections to look at for Chisholm Trail coming up here, and to make sure that those 500 seats would really help us over the next 5, 6, 7 years. Obviously, with the amount of growth in the south, we're going to have to keep looking and keep working to look at additional elementary school sites for the future. When you talk about 1,700 homes at River Farms, that's a big deal.
That'll fill up an elementary school.
Absolutely.
So it warrants, almost an elementary school just for that neighborhood.
Do you, Bob, do you have any idea on these areas, West Canyon Trails and on Three Creeks and stuff, the yield that we're getting per house?
We have that information. I don't recall it off the top of my head, but
We've seen that before.
I think that might be a question that comes up both with our overall board presentation coming up here. Because the yield, I think, is an important thing. It's not like you get one student for every home, but there are some communities that are being built that have a higher yield per student, and we need to know that for the potential growth of the south.
yes, I'll add that for the board presentation. The interesting thing is that as Austin grows north, it's going to affect the Belton High side, the south side.
Yeah.
As Temple economically grows, that affects Lake Belton High. So you really are going to catch it from both sides. So here's the quick look at the projections. So again, next year we're forecasting about almost 6% growth, 5.9% growth, which is growth of about 785 students. And this is what I'd call a mid-level projection. So somewhat conservative, and in 5 years, it would put you at about 16,465. I think from a facility planning perspective, you should really look at the high projections to do facility planning on the high forecast. This is what it looks like at the campus level. You can see Chisholm Trail is going to be 933 next fall. Tarver's going to be 825, so those are your two largest elementary schools. In the 24-25 year, Charter Oak would be 812, and you'd have two campuses over 1,000, but hopefully by then you're going to have another campus or two ready to come online. At the secondary level, it's the North Belton Middle School that has the highest enrollment. And then you can see in 6 years, we'd have 3 of the 4 middle schools exceeding capacity. And for the high schools, it's Lake Belton High that's growing a little faster. It's also at about 2,500 kids in 2024. Belton High would be at about 2,000 kids in 2024. So Belton New Tech's probably helping Belton High a little more than it's helping Lake Belton.
If you look at those middle school projections though, for the 24-25 year, even if you want to read through the lines, if we do get 2 elementaries, we're gonna need to redraw. If we don't, we're gonna need to redraw. But there's not really a whole lot of room on any of those campuses to really benefit any from that redraw. So I didn't remember that number getting on us that quick with the middle schools.
Well, I think the middle schools, we're able to work with those middle school numbers up until we get to that about 2029 range. And again, and I want to make sure I'm hearing this right, Bob. This is kind of the conservative projection that you have. I think we can get up to that 28, 29, 29, 30 range because you're still talking about some capacity overall. And so if you tweak some boundaries through an attendance boundary process, and realize that, yes, we're gonna have a crowded North Belton Middle School for a couple of years, we'll be okay. But this goes back to what we talked about with the whole board about this current bond election is not the last bond election that we will have to pursue in Belton ISD. There are gonna be additional ones if the growth continues that Bob is projecting for us. Eventually, we're gonna need an additional middle school, and I think when Bob looked at build out, when they were talking about 6 total middle schools potentially. And this conservative growth, I think we can manage. When you get to that high growth that he's gonna look at is where I get concerned.
So if the bond goes through and we have the 2 elementaries coming online, and we're gonna gain about 500 help to Chisholm, would that mean we're gonna take the portables offline there and sell those, get rid of them, leave them for future growth? How's that gonna, have we even talked about that?
So a couple of things, we have them to be able to be used in different spots. And what we said clearly to the bond exploration committee was, we wanna get away from long-term portables, but we are gonna have to use portables to manage growth as a fast growth school district. Long-term portables are a different story. So I think the ones that we have purchased, we will keep and be able to use in different spots. Now, obviously, things could change depending on a whole lot of other factors. Anything you wanna add on that, Mike?
I just think it gives us some flexibility for some short-term solutions, and I know we're gonna talk a little later tonight about some short-term solutions. But it also, shouldn't be viewed as a substitute for, because as we've talked many times, portables add some instructional space, but it doesn't add anything for your parent drop-off and pickup lines, your cafeteria, your restroom space, your gym space, library space, those sorts of things, so.
But that number there, if you look at Miller Heights, is that at 295? Can I see that for
It's 295
So that's what the projection for the enrollment's gonna be?
for Miller High.
So we're really gaining more than 500 if we were to take that offline.
Yes, and so, and a key thing in this, if you look at Miller Heights Elementary School and it says capacity 450, remember that capacity 450 is including long-standing portables that need to be removed. If you remove those, the capacity is more like Leon Heights Elementary School.
It's a little under 300 if you took all the portables.
And so we're gonna gain a good chunk of space in that school, or in the south, by adding that Hubbard branch location if the bond should pass.
So you'd get those 300 kids though from Miller Heights,
Correct,
and then you'd gain 100 at the southwest.
correct.
So you'd really be gaining 600 capacity, right?
We would be able to have room if you take a look at Chisholm Trail's growth, let's just take from 22 up to 30, it's about a 300 student growth at that point. You would be able to grow some of that large population that's going to Chisholm Trail and have them attend Hubbard Branch and really address that overcrowding. Now, Chisholm Trail was built to be an 800 student school, and so it's gonna be an 800 student school as part of a fast growing school district, I imagine, depending on where you redraw those attendance lines. But with the growth at Miller Heights, in that area down there, and if River Farm starts taking off faster than projected as well, if that's the case, I do believe we're gonna need that Hubbard Branch location to help us not only balance growth for Chisholm Trail, but also absorb some of the growth that you might see in that Miller Heights attendance zone. The good news is with Bob's current projections, I feel pretty comfortable that adding 500 seats in the south right now is gonna take us for the next 5, 6, 7 years pretty well. Again, we have said numerous times, we are gonna need another elementary school in the south with the amount of growth that is being projected. Eventually, we're gonna need another elementary school in the south. Hubbard Branch isn't the only solution long-term, we're gonna need additional solutions.
And I guess at that same time though, if those 2 new schools are gonna come online, if we do get the bond, we will have to redraw things, and we can't balance a little bit better.
Absolutely.
And that could gain a little bit more there too.
Absolutely. And you try not to redraw attendance boundaries right before you open new schools, because then you might be shifting families twice. So when you open a new school, you end up having to redraw attendance boundaries anyway. So I think that's gonna be a tricky one for us as a school district, just to manage that, because yes, absolutely, we could redraw some attendance boundaries right now, to help balance some more things out, if the bond should pass and an elementary school is built, then you're probably gonna be redrawing attendance boundaries again another year or two later, so.
Yeah, we wouldn't, if the bond passes, you just hold tight, right?
Most likely, I think the challenge for us is planning for that growth, and that's one of the items that we gotta really talk about is this, how do we plan for this upcoming school year, bond pass or not? We are gonna have growth to manage this upcoming school year, and we've been working on
High forecast at the secondary level just accelerates things. You can see, that North Belton High gets to 1,000 students in 2024, and, Lake Belton High accelerates as well, and it gets to 2,500 students in 2024. Key takeaways: the district is experiencing continued growth in the housing market due to the economic growth of the Belton Temple MSA. New home prices are increasing. In fact, they've increased 53% during the last 10 years. Belton ISD's got about 2,000 lots available to build on and more than 6,300 future lots. And we've got about 780 students that we added this fall. We expect the same thing for next year. In 5 years, the district could grow by more than 3,100 students. And in 10 years, the district's enrollment will likely top 19,000 kids.
Something else, I was talking with one of my customers, they were one of my builders, and he had just gotten out of a meeting with one of his realtors, and they were talking about the rate hikes and things like that. He was getting nervous, but because of the factors that you're talking about, the lower price per house, the growth that's happening just overall in the state, when people come in, I don't think the housing market's gonna slow down if the interest rates go up a point or so, right?
I don't think so either, because the job growth and the population growth coming into the Central Texas region is so strong. And then the buyers that could be affected would be the really young buyers. So your first-time home buyers could be impacted. Belton is a little bit more of a, it's a higher qualified buyer, the people that are coming to Belton. So I don't know that it would. Now Gerald, it could impact Gerald, because those are even more affordable and a lower priced neighborhood. So those could be the ones that would be impacted. The housing in Copper's Cove could be impacted. The housing in Temple could be impacted. But I think that the Belton region wouldn't be as vulnerable to the rate hike impact. But I've got some notes and some things we'll add to the PowerPoint for the board presentation. I'll slide on River Farms too. I'll put a slide in on that.
that.
That's big enough that it should,
It's big.
yeah.
And if it's moving as fast as we're hearing that it's moving, I think that's an important thing for us to know.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Anything else?
Thanks, Bob.
Appreciate it. All right, so we'll move on to B, elementary school number 13, design options.
So we had brought forward an item in February about moving forward with our design for elementary 13. Conceptually, the design for elementary 13 will be very similar to elementary 12. I mean, we decided last summer that as a district, we would embark on commissioning a new prototype for our elementary schools that can be used for years to come. We chose Huckabee as our architect, and they have kind of led us through a process of collaboration, and we had a lot of teachers and parents involved in the process, and we've come up with a very versatile design that it can be a one-story, it can be a two-story. It's flexible enough to fit a variety of needs. At the time, we also had established that we had funding for the first set of design documents, which we've been calling elementary school number 12. And so we've been working basically since last August on the elementary number 12 design. And next Monday night, you will be asked to take action on allowing us to go ahead and move forward with the construction documents on that project.
And
We're
that's
very excited about that. So,
12.
and so we're really excited about that. The elementary 13 design is going to be the same conceptually. It's going to be similar to elementary 12, but as y'all know, when you move from one site to another site, the construction documents are completely different. Your entry points, your plumbing's, mechanical, electrical, all those things are varied from plant to plant. So not having funding currently, meaning with the same source of funds that we use for our elementary 12 designs, we felt like that we wanted to pull that item. We wanted to take a little time to gather some more information and come back and really talk options with you guys and make sure that everyone felt good about the options. That was our best option moving forward. And so tonight we kind of talk about, as we talk about elementary 13, which for us would be our Hubbard Ranch site. We've talked with our design team and with their folks. We've talked with our attorney that's guided us through the contractual processes on this and what the district's best options are. At this time, we have lost a little time getting the number 13 contract together, which was what our attorney advised us to do, was a separate contract and not an amendment to our 12 to do the second set. And we've also wanted to take time to gather more information and really present you guys with best options. So tonight, talking about elementary design for number 13, we're talking about an elementary school. Because we've already done a lot of the conceptual work, it would not be the standard 6% that you usually do for a design for an elementary school. Because we're looking at most likely a two-story design. A two-story design on elementary 13 would be a 5.5% of construction costs. A one-story design on that site would be a 5% of construction costs. But as we talked with you guys last month, we're recommending a two-story design on that site because of the topography, because of the size, and because what it allows us to do with some of our playground areas and some of our pickup and drop-off lines and things like that. After talking with our attorney and after talking with our design team, really we feel that there's really kind of two options that would be something for us to consider tonight. The option of going ahead and moving forward with the contract and moving forward with the design immediately is a risk that we're not certain is the best risk for the district right now, because if our bond were not to pass, then any work that's done between now and that time that would be have to come out of the 2021-22 M&O budget to pay for that. We also have another option where we go ahead and approve the contract for elementary 13 design with the caveat of that we would issue a notice to proceed to our architects that they would, we have approved them to complete the design, but we would not proceed with that design until funding would be secured, which would be with the passage of a bond in May 7th. We also, after talking with our attorney, we can go ahead and approve the contract as is and just not sign it to execute it until we're ready to proceed. So that's another way that you can do it without actually doing the notice to proceed. And then obviously the fourth option would be just not to move forward at all until after the bond election, not to even bring the contract forward to the board. The only thing about that option is, with the board meeting not being until later in the month, we would lose another several weeks of design time if we waited until the May board meeting to bring the contract back forward again. So really, for as we've talked this through, and as we've kind of led you guys to this point, the best two options seem to be that we go ahead and approve the contract here in March, and we either just do a notice to proceed recommendation with that, or we just say that we just won't sign and execute the contract until we're ready to proceed.
Mike, what's the benefit again for the notice to proceed?
That we gain that time back between when the time that our votes are canvassed and our election is certified, from then until the board meeting, we gain about 2.5 weeks of design time then, which could be big later on.
And that's true of both of those options?
That's true of both of those options. There's not after talking with our attorney and kind of talking with our designers about preference, there's really not an advantage or disadvantage to either of those preferences. It's just you eliminate one step by just waiting to execute the contract.
And the reason timing is so important is what we just got done talking about with Bob on Chisholm Trail Elementary School and growth in the South. And so ultimately, when we were talking about potential for these things coming to fruition, our hope was to be able to have elementary 12, elementary 13 ready to go as quickly as possible for us, because we know based on our growth patterns. Our growth is in the north and in the south, and those are far enough away from each other that we need an option for both. And so hence our challenge right there. We don't want to be presumptive, and we want to be fiscally thoughtful about how we're addressing this. In the same breath, we also have an urgency in both the north and the south to have design and documents and stuff ready to go as quickly as possible. I think, Mike, if I'm not mistaken in this, we're still talking a 12-month-ish build time for elementary schools. I say ish because I think our architects and construction company will say it's probably more like 15 months. And I keep saying, I keep hearing 12. And so I say that because I think it's important for us to realize that even a 2-week window, 3-week window could be really critical for us in getting some stuff moving. And so this is the dilemma we've been wrestling with as an admin team for the last about 3 months now, I'd say since the end of December, about what the right way to proceed is for the second elementary school. And I want to break to you all.
Well, yeah, you mentioned that earlier about that, don't you proceed, I mean, is that the path that we think we probably ought
I
to
think,
go?
in my mind, you go ahead and execute the contract with a notice to proceed, and then it's done. I mean, that, like I say, I think it's 6 or half dozen, whichever way you wanna go, but an option where we make the commitment, but we don't proceed with design until we have funding secured is probably the safest way to go.
And I want to be really clear for public on that is not saying we're moving forward without a passage of a bond. That is saying we're moving forward contingent on passage of a bond.
Yes. Yeah, but it keeps the clock ticking.
Keeps the clock ticking.
If there is passage, we're already rolling at
That's
that
right.
point. Yeah, I think that's a better option. What do you think, Greg?
I mean, I would agree. I'm still trying to wrap my head a little bit around why we would do one and not the other. Is there some, do we as a district get better protection somehow by doing one over the other?
I don't think
Our
so.
attorney said that they would both be, that neither one puts us at risk. Both of those options that we wouldn't be on the hook for any labor costs until we told them to proceed.
Okay, and so let's, I'll say worst case scenario, right? And that bond doesn't pass, and so then what? So if we've gone up the notice to proceed, we just don't issue the notice to proceed?
That's right.
Right.
And it's basically on pause until we were in the time as a district where we could proceed from there.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, so actually the way you say that, so that basically says, at the point that we do have funds and we do go forward, that's the contract for number 13, right?
That's the way I understand
For
that.
the design.
Okay.
And at that point, since the bonds won't sell till July-ish, we would go ahead and take care of business and then just refund that back into the fund.
Yes.
Is that how it would work?
Yes, so we would work, and Melissa, feel free to weigh in on if you have anything that you'd like to weigh in on that one. But that, again, our goal would be, should a bond pass, or a bond election pass, and we were able to move forward, we would move forward as quickly as possible to get moving on our elementary sites. We do have some other discussions to talk about in this meeting as well about cadence of that and what it might look like. But again, design documents, getting sites ready and everything as quick as we can, I think would be important. Anything that you would say, Melissa, financially about after a bond passes and next
I
steps?
believe it was I think the earliest that we could, sell the bonds would be like end of July, 1st of August.
Yes.
So the funding would be available, could be available as early as mid-August, probably.
I just think that the perception, it's hard to explain to folks that it takes such a long time to build a school or a big building like this. There's so many things that have to fall into place that it doesn't make good sense to wait until the last minute because you're a year behind at that point.
Yeah.
And that's why we've taken some of these steps to be prepared in case. that way we can address the growth as quickly as possible.
It's definitely a challenge.
Yes.
And people, I think one thing that's different that people don't often apply to this is you're talking about school year calendars and all of this as well. So the opening of schools traditionally is a whole lot better if you can open in August or in a semester break, rather than having to shuffle attendance boundaries and or other situations mid-year. So it's just truthful challenge in all of this is the school year calendar plays a role in some of these discussions. So I think some people forget that sometimes it's not like opening up a commercial building, a Walmart or something like that, where you can open it up any month that you want. There are implications for families that are pretty important to consider in all of this as well.
Yeah, I think this will be well received.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. All right, we ready?
We will plan on bringing the, executing the contract for the notice to proceed forward to the regular board meeting calendar.
All right, let's see here. We'll move to C, opening strategies for elementary school 12 and 13.
So I can frame this, but we really want this to be a good discussion topic tonight. So if when we came to y'all last summer to start on an elementary design process, one of the things that we had discussed then that we haven't discussed a lot since then formally is that, we originally had kind of staggered those openings in a 2-year period, and the staffing being the biggest concern of that. So we've thrown out some more scenarios and really just want to have a discussion with you guys, because in some of the discussions we've had in the facilities committee, we've discussed what if we open them both at the same time. We've talked about logistically now about what may actually be possible to get done as far as construction and substantial completion. There could be a start of school year opening for one and a mid-school year opening for the other. So we really just want to kind of frame a discussion tonight about, obviously, we want options to be on the table for what's best for the district and ultimately what's best for kids. But we also wanted to kind of have a real realistic vision of what some of those possibilities might look like tonight.
I think assumptions go when, in a school district setting particularly, that if you're gonna open schools, you do it year after year. And so one would open in August of 22, 23, the other one would open in 23, 24 school year. So you do it year after year. And those are just examples, that's not the way it would play out. The way we see the growth patterns happening in the school district and stuff, and also it's important to note implications on supply chain and construction time bill have changed in the last 6 months pretty significantly for us. That we could end up in a situation where we could say open a school in August of 23 potentially, but then potentially open up a school in December or for the second semester of the school year of December 23, January 24. And so we wanted to start talking to you all a little bit about that. We also, in a facilities committee meeting at one point said, well, what would happen if we opened them both the same year? And the worry is always the additional amount of teachers that you need to hire ahead of time to be able to open those up and the impact on your maintenance and operations budget.
Is that even feasible? Have you run the numbers on that? Is that even something that can be afforded?
So here's what I would say, in the current plan that we have right now, the Hubbard branch would potentially replace Miller Heights Elementary School. One thing that we have to remember is we're not starting from scratch setting the staff for that school. You already have core staff that are already hired for that school to move into a new building at that point. So it's not like opening 2 brand new schools at the same time. That being said, it's still, just crude numbers in this one, staff and a half that you would be opening up potentially in the same year that you might need to think about. Another option that was presented is we could open up that second school mid-year, let's say it's the Hubbard branch site, and move Miller Heights students and staff as they are into that school for the spring semester. Let them finish out the school year and then fill out for the next school year the remaining staff of that. So it really would be still staggering the hiring of the staff on an annual basis, but taking advantage of opening the school as quickly as possible to get the kinks out, to get people in the building, to get the Miller Heights students enjoying the new facility, to get their community adjusted to it, and also very significantly, potentially saving us on 6 months of construction costs.
So is it feasible? Can we do both at one time? Could we do the build?
So the Hubbard branch, looking at if you start design on that in May, then yes, it would be feasible to have, school January 24, opening, moving in the month of December. And then, opening the number 12 at Northridge in the previous fall.
And I think that kind of solves that $4 million additional cost. If we were to do that year lag, that's kind of where that came from. If we could bump it up 6 months, or if we could start them both at the same time, doing the staggered filling up with the Miller Heights people to save the money on the salaries and then the positions, I mean, seems like it would be beneficial to try to do it that way to save that money.
I think for the construction cost topic and for the population growth topic, the quicker you can open the schools, the better.
Yep.
For our maintenance and operations budget, I think we've gotta continue to put pen to paper on all of that to see how that would play out. We believe that even by opening a school mid-year, we would still be staggering the personnel costs on an annual basis and we'd be okay. If we were to change that though and say, we're gonna change attendance boundaries mid-year and hire a full staff at the new school and open it in January, you're talking a whole lot of moving parts for a year that I think would be pretty challenging.
I think that would be awful painful to try to do that process.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about the attendance boundaries. I'm like,
That would be
can we
bad.
please not do that mid-year? Like lift and shift Miller Heights over there, don't do anything with attendance boundaries mid-year. Yeah.
I think for me, I think that it'd be smart for us to stay away from that. I think that would be a nightmare for a lot of people. That being said, I don't wanna underestimate the impact of growth at Chisholm Trail on families. And so I think we have to have some thoughtful strategies for growth and how we're gonna manage that coming up here over the next few months. Specifically over the next year, we're projected, as Bob said, to be at 933 Chisholm Trail for the fall. That's 130 plus students over the capacity of that school. You add an additional year onto that, obviously that's a bigger pitch. And I think that's gonna be a challenge for us. And Mike will talk a little bit more about that coming up on item F. But we wanted to open the discussion with you all to feel something out from our facilities committee, if that is a plan you'd be open to, is potentially opening a Hubbard branch location site should a bond pass mid-year. So that would be December 23, January 24, potentially opening for that one, and go forward from there.
I would think, just personally, being married to a teacher and knowing the nesting that goes on in the summer, getting ready for their, rooms and things like that, that would be the biggest. Maybe we could get all hands on deck one day,
That's right.
all the teachers from the district come and.
Experienced that before.
Yeah.
I've been in a district that did a mid-year opening of school.
Mhm.
And it actually was pretty incredible. It was all hands on deck,
Yep.
helping move them, but it was also like kind of literally rolling out red carpet for the kids and did bus them over and had a lot of celebration welcoming them into their new building. It was something special.
I just
So
can't.
we could make it nice.
I can't imagine anybody voting no, we don't wanna move into a brand new school at Christmas. I just don't see how they would say no.
It seems like they wouldn't, but it's strange times sometimes, so I don't know what to predict sometimes.
Can I speak one more to the timing too of construction? In usual circumstances, it's not out of the question at all to build an elementary school of this size in 12 months. And I don't think hopeful is the word we want to use. If everything goes in usual circumstances, then it's still possible to build a school. But what the contingency that's being built in is for if you do get a longer than normal lead time on steel or concrete or some type of roofing products, or you do get into an issue where you can't get your HVAC units or aren't shipping for whatever might be going on in the world at that time, so.
For 3
That,
weeks of
you know,
rain,
building
you're
it-
pouring concrete.
3
weeks of rain when you're pouring concrete.
Yeah, and like I say, that is contingency's always built in for weather, but the thing that's happened in the last year or so is you've had materials contingencies that have to be built in, so. Construction is very possible in 12 months, but we just have to we have to get the materials we need when we need them for construction to roll, and that's kind of where that wiggle area comes in. It's not, you're gonna have guys working 24/7 and get it done. It's, can you get all the materials there when you need them, and all the subcontractors there when you need them to get the work done.
How, y'all have other schools under construction right now, I would have to guess, are things okay?
They are taking longer to build.
Yeah.
As the architect, I don't mind committing to 12 months, but I'm not the guy building it.
I have a crazy idea.
Yeah.
I don't know that this is a good idea, but just throwing stuff at the wall, right, to see what sticks. If we were gonna go to a mid-year option, right, and only do Miller Heights, like move Miller Heights over there, that doesn't really help the Chisholm Trail situation, right, for another half a school year. According to the demographic data, Miller Heights does have capacity. So, again, I don't know how crazy this is, right, but would you consider potentially redrawing the boundaries to more people at Miller Heights for that year, and so that then when you go over half the year, you're bringing more people with you, right? Again, I don't know how that would go over, I don't know if it's feasible, right, I'm just looking at how would you get relief to Chisholm Trail faster, right?
You wanna talk a little bit about that, Mike, or you want me to jump in?
You go first.
So we've spent quite a bit of time talking about this, and the challenge with redrawing the boundaries is the movement and maybe like you said, you don't know how parents would feel about some of that, right? And so you redraw boundaries, you're taking the choice out a little bit. So we talk more about specific targeted transfers.
Okay.
An example, if you're in a certain area, if we know we're gonna have to redraw the attendance boundary and we get the maps done ahead of time, working with the families ahead of time and saying, eventually you're gonna be moving, would you like to move now? And be able to go a half a year earlier into a brand new school versus waiting the full year.
And a majority of the people that go to Chisholm are being transported there. That neighborhood of Walkers isn't that many kids in that district.
Correct.
In that school.
Correct.
So they're driving anyway.
It's growing.
Now, we wouldn't bus those kids, would we, or is that something we're looking at too?
I think we have to look at it, and I don't know, we don't have a map in here of it. I think it's important to remember that Chisholm Trail attendance boundary is huge. It's a huge attendance boundary, and it goes all the way over to Loop 121, Shanklin Road area, Bell County Expo Center. So all those new builds that Bob was pointing out are all still in Chisholm Trail. But they border the Miller Heights attendance boundary and could be moved over to that Hubbard Branch area as well. So I think there are some very strategic things that we can do getting into an attendance boundary discussion to figure out the right breakdown in addition to the additional 100 seats at Southwest Elementary School, trying to take a look at those and offer transfer opportunities for people ahead of time, because I do think that would help alleviate some of the stress on people. That being said, we're still, Chisholm Trail is a challenge for us, and it's important for our public to know we have been working on this for over a year, exploring all options in the south, and everybody seems to forget that the 100 acres that we have on Shanklin Road, while some people would like us to build an elementary school there, we still don't have utilities at that site. And we heard a facilities committee presentation to our board from the city of Belton that we would have to pay millions of dollars to add facilities.
That was almost 2 years ago, and it's $4 million back then. It's gotta be 6+ now.
So we do think that Hubbard Branch is the best option we have to help us with the Chisholm Trail overcrowding. And the timing of the opening for Hubbard Branch, that potential Hubbard Branch site, and how we would get students to move over there at the appropriate time to relieve Chisholm Trail is the big puzzle that we're working on.
Something I haven't thought about, I'm sorry, Chris. Something I haven't, but you just mentioned it, a light bulb went off in my head is, where are we design and projections for the addition at Southwest?
So we have to wait until a bond passes in order for us to
We'll
do
wait
that.
for that.
Correct.
Yeah, that's 13 and a half, we're not
Yes.
talking about that.
Yes. Correct.
I just didn't know if we'd already started like preliminary, hey, where we gonna put it, how's it gonna fit?
Now, we do have, I mean, obviously, we have conceptual ideas about that, and we've been talking about that. That being said, it's the similar discussion that we had about, elementary school 13, costs, getting ahead of ourselves and having to wait until a potential bond election passes. The challenge of growth is a wonderful challenge to have, but timing and funding play a real big role for us to get the designs done and to get people moved in a timely manner.
And I feel like if whatever we do with number 13 and Hubbard Branch doesn't bring relief to Chisholm Trail or cost savings, then don't rush.
Yeah.
Right, and wait till the next year,
Yeah.
right? Because, I mean, that's really the big pain point, right?
Those are-
If it's
those are
gonna,
the two
if
things.
moving Miller Heights there and not bringing relief to Chisholm Trail, and it's gonna cost us more somehow, like, I don't think we can do that, right?
Right. And I think that's the part that, right now, based on what we're seeing in construction costs, et cetera, it makes sense to have a mid-year opening to save us on construction costs. Get it done as quickly as we could and get that open. But it's not gonna be perfect on the timing side for relieving the overcrowding at Chisholm, which is the challenge. So, we do have other ideas though, and we've been working on brainstorming those ideas, again, talking about transfers and options, talking about attendance boundaries ahead of time, to relieve that overcrowding. Those are things that we definitely can explore, because we do know that the overcrowding is a challenge for us.
And I think if there's a short-term boundary, I think we would have to look at the short and long together, right? So that whatever happens in the short automatically goes in the long,
That's right.
right? It's all at one time.
That's right.
So there's no question, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And those are tricky discussions to have.
This reminds me of this dish that my wife makes in the holidays, a 7-layer Jell-O dip. You know, you can only do one layer at a time, but when it's all done, it's all pretty when you cut the pieces, but this is a lot of layers.
There are a
There's a lot
lot
of stuff going on.
I think it's important to point out that we, as a school district, know the challenges that our schools and families are facing with overcrowding. We see it, we visit the schools, we know the demographer numbers as well as anybody does, and we're moving as quickly as we can on stuff, but we've got to wait for potential bond elections to really make some big movement on some stuff. Anything that we need to have?
The biggest point I was gonna make is, and you made it first, is that Chisholm Trail attendance boundary is large. And although Three Creeks is driving a lot of the growth, there's still a lot of other kids in that boundary that are gonna be impacted when we are able to put new facilities online. And they're gonna be impacted for the better, that we're gonna be able to get them in some better situations. So one of the things that we're working with our demographer on is getting some neighborhood and subdivision breakdowns on smaller enrollment, not a full attendance boundary enrollment count, but some neighborhood enrollment numbers where we can start kind of playing with how could we impact, and like I said, the actual rezoning process is a community-based process that the board ultimately will adopt. But for some short-term fixes, we need some good data so that we can kind of start seeing how does any move in that area impacts. But it's our biggest, that and High Point are our two biggest zones, so there's a lot of land in those.
There's a lot of land.
Wow. All right. So moving on, I guess we'll do our update on our winter.
Just
Storm
to be
repairs.
clear, on Chris's point on elementary 13, I think as an administrative team too, we're on the same page. You wouldn't push to open a new school if it didn't save us in dollar amounts and or overcrowding.
Right.
Right, so I think we're all kind of on the same page on that one. As we continue to progress through this and potentially see results of a bond election, we'll bring you more updates along the way as to timelines and how this might play out.
All right. winter storm?
So we did have one incident, district-wide during our 2-day freeze, back in February. We did have a water chill coil on a rooftop unit at Lake Belton High School. There was substantial water that entered the building, above the library. And so we were able to, we had a staff member that was there that morning getting things ready for a basketball game and found it. So, the freeze was earlier, but when it started to thaw, is when we actually had the problem. And so we were able to mobilize staff very quickly, but the amount of water that was there, we don't have the equipment to extract that much water. And our biggest concern at that point was, we've got to get this water out of here as quickly as possible because we want to save all of this furniture. I mean, all of the shelving and kiosks that the books and the materials are on. There's a lot of soft furniture in that area as well. And so we did, using our policy for emergency situations, where it was able to get a restoration company there with some heavy equipment. It looks like the damage is limited to some replacing the coils on the chiller on top, and we did have our adjuster out and and looked at the carpet, and the adjuster's recommendation was to go ahead and replace the carpet in the full library and part of the visual learning center as well. And it came in less expensive than we thought it was going to, but it's still the largest expense outside of the restoration for the project. And we do have some minor ceiling replacements that we'll be able to do in-house, some painting and some tape float texture that we'll be able to do in-house as well. The adjuster, all of these things are gonna be able to be on our insurance claim, so we're just gonna be out of pocket for our deductible. And, this is something that the carpet is it's not a mold issue or anything like that, so we're not it's not something we're having to rush and do, but the carpet, our adjuster did recommend we go ahead and replace the carpet based on the evaluation we got from a professional that came and checked it out for us.
So the particle board shelves of all the books and some of the desks and everything, when I was there, there
was about 2 inches of standing water.
So how
We
did
were able
those
to
two?
get they were able to, so they got the water off, and then as everything was, the dehumidifiers and the dryers were at work, they came in and actually jacked those up to check the condition of them and the carpet underneath, and we were able to get the water off quick enough that the furniture didn't absorb that water. That was our big fear, was we were gonna have to replace all of our bookshelves and stuff. So that was kind of where the urgency was. I think David and I and Keith Cook and Don Garner, and we had several custodians there, and we were running our excavators, and the water was just as quick as we could get it up, it was just filling back up again. So that was kind of where the trigger was to make that move, to bring in the professionals. And they actually had equipment there and staff there from the 15th all the way until the 22nd. Is when they removed the last pieces of their equipment. So they had dehumidifiers and blowers and things there for about a week afterwards, getting all that moisture out. So.
And our deductible is still 25 on this?
So did that come through the HVAC system then, right? You said it was a chiller, and so it wasn't a roof problem, it was.
It was.
It wasn't a roof problem, so the event happened at night and on the weekend. So we had no chill water flow because the building's not occupied. So the outside air damper was open, because we always try to bring in outside air. It froze the coil as it thawed out. Of course, the condensate line, where it would typically drain out to, was frozen solid. So, so we have taken some steps to hopefully prevent this from happening. So in the event the temperature drops below 28 degrees now, we'll bring on chill water pumps and flow water. And we will close all the outside air. So hopefully.
Theoretically, with the outside air closed and constant water flow, it shouldn't freeze. As we investigated the events of 2021, it was the assumption that was that the problem occurred because the power was off for 4 days. So what we found in this case was it was actually a combination of no water flow, open vents, and multiple days of freezing temperatures.
I mean, that makes sense to me. When I was asking the question, trying to figure out, hey, look, do we have a bigger problem there?
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Just like,
Trust us, we know.
we were like,
We were
is this
asking
gonna happen
that
every
as well.
time we get an ice?
Yeah,
So.
Cause, you know, if we're building new schools, like, they're not gonna have this problem.
Right?
They won't have chew water.
Here's what I would say, so, is that it just so happens that you have back-to-back, I mean, obviously the 2021 ice storm was far more significant than this last year, but pretty significant ice storms, 2 years in a row on all of this too. And the special thanks to David and his team, Mike, for being out there. There were a whole lot of people out there, and it was amazing, because when I first went out there, you looked around and you're like, this damage is gonna be really bad. And this price tag is a whole lot less than I originally thought it was gonna be, and I think that's due to quick work by people and being allowed to be able to get Balfour in and the restoration company in quickly.
Yeah, when I got there that morning in that little office where, you know, came through that little study
Yes.
office, it was like someone had a garden hose up there, it was all full blast, a lot of water.
Well, we can thank
Pretty amazing.
Sam Skidmore, had he not scheduled a basketball game, we would have never found it.
Good job, Sam.
I mean, we need a new natatorium, but this is not the right way to go.
Not the way to go about that. It was interesting too, just side note on Balfour stuff, I mean, y'all saw it probably from there, I mean, they were jacking the temperature up quite a few degrees, getting the blowers going, sealing everything, doing everything they can to extract that water out, and obviously they've done a pretty good job for us, so we're thankful for that.
Very good. All right, so we'll move from winter storm repairs to Tiger Field turf.
I think y'all know Coach Skidmore.
Yeah.
Sam, thanks for joining us up here. And so, what we're gonna be bringing to you are some discussions on turf. We, as the Bond Exploration Committee discussed this fall, we have a challenge with stadiums in Belton ISD with the opening of Lake Belton High School and only a JV field at that school. We have some challenges as we continue to grow and move forward. And so what Sam's gonna talk us through today are some options to consider actually at Tiger Field, current Tiger Field, to be able to make it more conducive to multiple varsity teams playing on that field.
Thank you for having me. So what you have in front of you is a couple designs from Field Turf. Couple different options on turf, and so what we talked about is looking at the possibility of replacing the turf in both end zones and the middle logo, because as you know, right now it's one end zone's Belton, one end zone's Tigers, and the Rocky B is in the middle. From my understanding, this was always part of the plan this year to address turf issues for Lake Belton's first ever varsity season, with Tiger Field being the home school for both. In the back of the packet, you also see the scoreboard changes from where it says Belton Tigers, and this is just my rendering so you can get an idea of what it looked like, so it's not perfectly perfect, but where it would say Belton ISD. And we looked at a couple different options. The full field turf replacement, the turf still has life left in it, so this option is a lot better of utilizing the money we spent back in 2015 when we did re-turf the field, fix the track, address a lot of issues at Tiger Field. And
Is that about 4 years life on the turf?
we got about 40, we could push it about 4 to 5 more years on the turf. And it's still in good shape. The one thing you won't notice on here, but turf has changed a lot since we even installed it in. So we looked at on some designs on the white, especially because a lot of the reds fade with the UV and the greens are gonna fade. So it's not gonna match perfectly, and in fact, they don't even make that soft turf anymore, so there will be some differences in the turf. But I have been, for 2 years, I've talked to many students, many family members about it feeling like being a visitor at their home stadium, and so we brought up some ideas of how to make it more conducive for Lake Belton High School and making them feel like their home stadium in their first ever varsity season.
So the thing that concerns me whenever we talk about, well, we can get so many years more out of the field, at what point in time can you determine, well, it's run its course? I mean, because I think you get more injuries the older it gets, it's not as safe. So I would rather see us maybe err towards the side of, well, you know, I don't know, that's just, I'm worried about kids getting hurt whenever the thing gets to a point where it's not as safe as it ought to be. Plus with the advances in turf, just in the last 3 years, the fields are just better, and they're better for the kids.
And when we installed this turf at 15, it was top of the line turf. Being on the turf and grooming the turf for Friday night fields, it is still in good shape. When we replace the turf, it is nowhere near the condition it was replaced in 2014, where there was drug out spots with just rubber. It's still in good condition as of right now.
I think that's a good point. I think we would have to make sure that we're comfortable with that. We don't want safety to be concerned, but I do, just from being in a lot of football stadiums, I do think our team has done a good job since 2015 taking care of that field.
So the cost to replace everything would be what?
About $540,000.
$540, and the cost to replace the end zones and the center emblem is what?
About 125, a little over 125,000.
And is that something that we have money to do at this time to proceed with?
That's something that we are working on, making sure we have money to do. Obviously, that's a good sized dollar amount, and in a tight budget time when we don't know outcomes of future elections, we are frugal in every way that we possibly can be.
I mean, is this something that we're waiting on the election to see?
No, we're proposing to move forward with some changes for our students right now. We do not have a stadium solution based on the bond exploration committee work. And so for now, the stadium solution that we have that is the most affordable for us as a school district is addressing the turf issues and stuff that you see here.
And is this something that you get enough complaints from the lake folks to warrant the $125,000?
And I was,
You wear the wig, so you know. You know.
It's coming out on Friday night, by the way, just so you know.
Is it?
It's got some playoff life in it.
There you go.
and I wouldn't say as much complaints as being kind to those seniors over there. They're gonna be seniors from first every time. Those band members, those football players, the dance team, the cheerleaders, and making it feel like an inviting home stadium and we want to create exceptional experiences for kids, and I think that's a step towards creating exceptional experience for those kids.
Now, soccer-wise, will Lake still participate in their varsity on their own field over there? Everything stays. This is just for football.
Yeah, we want to open up one side of it for soccer.
Yeah, I think if you try to move them, you'd have to, it would be bad news.
No, they got everything they need in soccer over there, and everything's set. This would only address the 5 varsity football games.
So why not end up with Tigers in one, Broncos in the other? I'm not suggesting
No,
that's what we should do, but did you think about that? Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that. I've talked to some school districts. I know Bastrop is dealing with that right now because from the other side of things, that is Belton. For everything outside of those 5 Friday nights, that's Belton Stadium.
Yeah.
And for when they play their varsity
That's a
soccer
good point.
games
Yeah.
and all that
That's
stuff.
a good one.
So that's what we kind of looked at it there, to make sure we're trying to take care of both and be kind to both
That
at the
makes
same
sense.
time.
There you go. Good. So now what?
Any concerns?
I think it's appropriate. I mean, if we have some money to do it, I think it'd be nice for the Lake kids to have that.
Yeah, we're working hard to make sure we can do something. We know this is an issue that needs to be addressed, so we want to make sure we brought it to you all first before we bring it potentially to whole board for action. Our plan is to bring it to whole board for action in the upcoming board meeting.
Can I ask a related question? It's not turf, but, so halftime, where do they go? What facilities does Lake use at halftime?
They have their own locker room that when Coach Morgan was the athletic director, when we remodeled the soccer baseball field house, we dedicated a locker room just for them. We have graphics in there, and it is their locker room, that's all it's used for.
Yeah, it's one of the few I haven't been in.
the outfield, like behind the outfield of the baseball.
Oh,
field,
yeah,
in between
yeah,
that and the
okay, I know what you're
Natatorium,
talking about.
that building right there.
But we wanted to make sure they had their own dedicated locker room that's only theirs.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because just from a game day logistics standpoint, it always seems like we show back up late because like we're walking from who knows where back to the field.
Maybe
So-
coach board adjustments at halftime.
Yeah. Here's what I would say though. This is not ideal.
Yeah, no, I get that.
And their locker room location and stuff is not ideal either. And we still have work to do long term. This is a Band-Aid, and we have work to do long term on this topic. We're working to get a long-term facilities committee together and have them help us come up with a plan somewhere along the line as a school district. we're gonna have to make a plan for stadium use, stadium repairs, and philosophy, as Bob said. You know, we're gonna be talking a third, potentially fourth high school eventually in Belton ISD, and these discussions are gonna have to take place to address long-term needs.
Yeah, because this certainly does not silence the crowd, right? I mean, we have to know that.
That's right.
You know, the fact that it's still called Tiger Field, and I'm not saying we should change it, right? But the fact that it's still Tiger Field, right? And any branding on the outside, like, it's still not gonna silence everybody, but it's a good step.
And with the scoreboard change, the only thing that would be strictly is the Tiger Field logos. We did add the Bronco and the Tiger mascot outside, and, the only thing besides the field house, so.
I do think that that is something, you know, we can continue to talk about that as a facilities committee too, about naming our facilities and what's best for all of this transition. There's a lot of history, don't wanna step on any toes in all of this.
Yeah.
That being said, it may work out that this ends up being our stadium long-term for two schools, and we're gonna need to also talk about potential naming of
Yeah,
facilities.
admittedly, I do not have an appreciation for the history. So
Yeah.
at some point, I would love the bigger history lesson, but, you know, even if I'm a Dragon at this point now,
Right.
and, you know, if they do participate in track, right, I mean, that's an individual sport, I don't know if they're gonna do that or not, right? So,
I think I brought it up one time at a huddle lunch about Tiger Field and that generation thinks Tiger Field's on 6th Street.
Yep.
They're not even worried about Tiger Field. So you're not picking up the tradition until the 90s. Was it 94, 95, whenever that got put together? Was it not a little bit earlier? So that's when you kind of pick up that generation. Because for old timers, Tiger Field's downtown.
Well, it's interesting, I was looking for a map the other day, and I Googled Wilson Kersey Field, and it popped up and it says home of the Belton Tigers.
Okay.
Anything else?
Did y'all have any opinion on the two different designs?
I like the Belton ISD. I mean, I think the white's probably better because, I mean, our stuff's kind of pinkish now. So, yeah.
That's something that was red, it's
I'm
something.
talking about the middle logo.
yeah, he's talking about the middle
Oh,
logo.
I like that. I like what the
Versus
Texas
the
one.
See the Texas one on there?
Yeah, I like the Texas
I
one.
do think that ended up looking better than the black Belton ISD on the other one.
Plus, the apple kind
I
of
read that?
symbolizes more of the academic side of Belton ISD, right?
Yep.
And so I think the other logo looks better to me.
And the white Texas will contrast less as they cut that middle out with the different greens.
There you go.
The greens are not kind of perfectly matched.
I got you. No, I like that one better.
We should probably say that one more time, the greens are not gonna perfectly match, and everybody knows that before we go into the first home football game.
As a former football parent, the last thing that I worried about was what the field looked like, what it said in the end zone. I was worried about how many times they were gonna throw the ball to my son. Who was gonna get hurt, who was gonna win the game. So, I mean, being a former parent, this was the last thing I'd be worried about. But that's just me, Ty Taggart.
I was glad to hear that.
Yeah, as long as it's not gonna throw the band off, we're good.
I think we'll be okay. We'll still have the same 50-yard line, so I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, but I think it's good moving forward for those kids. All right. Okay, so we're back to options for addressing elementary growth and capacity for 2022-23.
This one is a little more of an update. We're not ready to make the recommendations on how we're gonna handle this, but we kinda wanna talk to you about the process we've been going through. I know we've spoken with y'all before, just kind of about general growth strategies. It goes down from, new facilities, changing attendance boundaries, so forth, adding portables. There are 8 or 9 things that are pretty standard responses that school districts have to address growth. We know that with the pending bond, even with the passage of a pending bond, we won't have new facilities in the fall of 2022. That's not gonna happen. But we also know, based on our demographer's report tonight, that we're gonna have around over 700 new students. And if historical trends continue, about 300 to 350 of those kids will be elementary students. So we have been working in teams. We have our cabinet's been working on this. And as Matt said, these are things a lot of these we've been working on for over a year now, but we're really starting to try to hone in to some specifics of when the fall of 22 comes, what are some strategies that we're going to be able to utilize, and not just going to how many portables do we have to add? Obviously, we would really want to stay away from portables as much as we can. We felt like we were in a situation last year where we kind of had to go that route. We talked with our elementary principals yesterday and got some ideas from them, yesterday, Tuesday. And, kind of talked with them a little bit about, what a great problem to have, that you've got all these kids coming, you've got people that are excited to come to school in Belton, and we've been able to keep up with staffing. We actually have really, really strong class size numbers this year. We have the majority of our classes are in a good spot as far as class sizes. We haven't had to do what some districts have done and absorb these really large class numbers and class sizes. And so really we're in a great spot, but we're gonna have to come up with some great ideas. And we said all options are on the table. We went through a similar exercise not too long ago with our cabinet and with some of our executive directors and some of our leaders in the central office. And then we did a similar exercise with all of our elementary principals and some of our other executive directors and some of our other leadership yesterday. And we've come up with somewhere in the neighborhood of a little over 20 ideas. And when Chris was talking earlier about, is there a strategic way to move certain kids now that are going to end up there anyway? I mean, those are some of the types of things we've been working on. Is there some ways to do some, as Matt mentioned, some, anticipating some future moves and go ahead and allow some type of a transfer move ahead of time? We talked about, is there some opportunities to strategically move certain grades or grade levels and things like that, together to an area where we may have some capacity. So, as you look at it, there's a couple of campuses that have a little capacity now. They may not have it 3 years from now, but it may be something that we could utilize in 22, 23. We've talked about looking at how we handle some of our fine arts and some of our specials. Can we push those into the classroom and free up some spaces where we can have some additional instructional spaces? Looking at how we do some of our intervention and inclusion practices, and can we free up some spaces that might be used for classroom spaces there? Talking about, can we utilize our libraries in a different way? Can we have class in the library at certain times during the day? I think these are not some things that you would want to be your long-range plan about using your library half the day for its instructional space, or using your music rooms as an instructional space, or pushing all of your inclusion into the classroom and not having resource rooms and things of that nature. But in an emergency situation, and when money's tight, and not just wanting to go to the lowest hanging fruit, and that's saying, let's just have, a ton of portables every time we get.
Look what we're doing at like Belton Middle School. We got orchestra kids practicing in the closet.
Right.
We have 6th graders getting dressed
And a
in a
portable.
portable with no bathroom to go to while they're getting dressed.
Right.
So, yeah, we can adapt. It's not the optimum for our kids. And I hope that people can see that. But I get we have to come up with these strategies. Because even if it does go through, we still have another at least a whole nother calendar year to survive through till we get the new things online.
And we talked about maybe in some of our bigger rooms, looking at how we do co-teaching strategies, and maybe you have, there's some things that we can do to still, what we really don't wanna do is get to a point where we have really large class sizes, or where we're moving a bunch of kids around constantly. Those are we wanna be really kind to families, and we wanna guarantee the highest level of instruction we can. So as we told our team, earlier, as we told our principals yesterday, all options are on the table at this point for some solutions, and that's kind of the update I wanted to get you. We're thinking, think outside the box and try to do things that are going to be best for our kids.
I think I'll use an example that Mike brought up, even exploring moving a grade level from a school to another location for a year. So, example, you might have to take a look at using space at Bex, if we had space at Bex, to have a kindergarten at Bex, because we can use that space in the facility while we're building new schools, potentially pending a bond election. So we're exploring everything, and we wanted to make sure you all as board members knew that, because we are gonna have to address growth, and we're gonna try and do it in a way that doesn't bring in a lot of portables over this summer.
I think we should just go ahead and make a motion to move a couple of the wings of kindergarten to this room and the other room next
That's number,
door. Really? This
let's
is
see, that's number,
It's on the list.
Oh, yeah.
it was on both lists. It
Are you
was
kidding?
one
I
thing
was
that
just
both
joking
groups came
around.
up with was moving, using central office space for classrooms. So it was number 18 on one list, and I think number 12 on the other, so.
Something serious though, I've heard us talk about our Head Start stuff that's over at the Beck's facility. How many rooms do we have that get utilized for that?
We have 5 classrooms.
Thank goodness Gabby's here.
Yeah,
Trying to count in my head.
Yeah, we have 5 classrooms there, and we have a place that's dedicated to kitchen space that Head Start uses, and 2 offices, as well as a collaboration space. So currently 5 dedicated classrooms.
So again, all options are on the table. We wanted you to know that we're exploring those. I do think in times of growth like this, when we're talking to the monitor report, having you know that we're even talking about can a class be held in the superintendent's office if need be. All things are on the table right now, and we're gonna do our best to make sure our families and our students have the best space possible.
I really like that kindergarten and Beck's idea though. I mean, I always bellyache about looking at this chart and why do we include Beck's and all the other elementary school numbers that, I mean, 200 seats capacity there. Now, but is that really 200 seats of capacity, or is that some of that offline because of the Head Start program, right? When you say they're dedicated 5 classrooms.
Yeah, currently it would be considered offline because
Okay,
Head
so
Start
that's
is
not
not
counted in our
capacity.
628 capacity then?
I think it would be.
Yeah,
I think that's
okay.
the building capacity.
So that's like,
It's
then
been
maybe,
building
so it's really like 100 less. Then.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And so I think, but example of that is still our building.
Well, no, I get that.
And so we have to explore potential options like that, like, should you move more sections of kindergarten to Beck's?
Right.
To help us manage the growth over the next year. Some of those possibilities might be explored here this spring.
All right. Okay, last thing, I guess, update on our natatorium conditions. Now, we're talking about the natatorium at Belton High School, not the one at Lake Belton High School, in the orchestra pit.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's what we're interested in.
That's the dive well.
Yeah.
You said you wanted one.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna introduce Sam. I'm gonna let Sam take it from here.
There you go.
Alright, in the last couple of years, we have noticed some deterioration from the tile, around both pools. We've cracked, chip, break, causes some real sharp edges around the pool, so we started looking into that and talking to our progressive choirs about possible replacing it. But recently, we've noticed some bubbles and ribbons in the pool liner. And so we got progressive out and talked to them. As you know, that pool liner tile was the original pool tile liner from 2006. I believe that's the correct date. And it's estimated to last about 15 years. And so after reviewing with Progressive Aquatics, the ribbons and the bubbles is a sign of water getting underneath the pool liner. And so kind of how it's set up is that you have your metal pool, and then the liner goes down, and then the tile seals the liner in. So water could be getting through the pool liner, because the pool liner is made up of a very thin PVC material, so it could be going directly through, or because the tile's chipping and breaking off, it's going underneath by the drains. And talking about possibly just replacing the tile around the pool. When they pull that tile, the liner is gonna get torn too. It's just the way it's set up. And so as digging a little deeper, because that pool was installed before I got here, it is a galvanized steel pool, which does lead to possible rust happening as water's getting under that liner. And so damage could be, if it's not addressed, could be significant. So if you do nothing and the water continues to get underneath the pool liner, you run the risk of having to replace both pools at some point. And Progressive recommends replacing the liner and tile as soon as possible. It is about a 4-month lead time on the liner, and it took us about 3 months to get a quote on the liner. That would put us, our our target date, we wanted to try to do it in July and August if that was the route we were to go, because that is the end of club season and that was before we start high school back up once school starts, and it's about a month to install. You'll have to drain the pools and install, and that they did say they can't guarantee there's no damage on the pool already, but it's probably not extensive. It's probably not a replacement style event at this point in time. So that's kind of an update what I have for y'all.
How much?
For the pool liner, I didn't write down. 368.
368.
Sorry, I didn't write that.
And that's the tile and the liner?
The tile and liner replacing the whole
400 grand?
cylinder.
And we can get started on it July-ish?
It's about 4 months, yeah. That'd be, late July would be the target date we want to shoot for.
And so that's gonna affect summer, swim lessons.
Well, we
Yes,
had,
right?
we had it scheduled summer swim lessons to end, the last session goes till the end of club season, so it ends about July 26th, I believe, is the last. And so the earliest we could probably get started is the end of July, early August.
And it takes them a month to do it?
They say 3 to 4 weeks, but I always shoot a little bit longer, so.
So that would get into August, start of school, wouldn't it?
So going back to your question a little bit earlier about turf and dollars, so this is something that we do not have $400,000 just sitting around to address. It's a challenging discussion for us because you can continue to wait it out. These are the things we talked about with the bond exploration committee. We know there are needs that are significant with that pool. And we can continue to wait it out, but the cost of waiting that out could be increased damage to the galvanized steel underneath, which could lead to major dollar amount repairs. And it could also lead to significant impact on student swim opportunities, obviously. Flip side of that is, in order to find that $400,000, we are going to have to, take some pretty drastic approaches to figure out how to get that dollar amount to make those repairs. And so we as a cabinet would have to go through a process to end some budgets early, do whatever we can right now to tighten things up pretty significantly over the remaining months of the school year in order to make that come to fruition. And I share that with you just like that because that impacts people as well. Because, again, this is not an expense that we have the cash sitting on hand for. Thoughts? And again, challenges are waiting it out, seeing how long it lasts, being able to potentially have dollars to do it versus trying to find the dollars out, addressing it, and moving forward.
Particularly in a year with the attendance challenges that we're having regarding COVID.
And we have not received relief yet from TEA regarding any COVID implications. There is talk of it, but and obviously state representatives have taken, and the education committee, House of Representatives, education committee has taken a good stance on it. That being said, we have not received it.
What is your thoughts, Sam, on if we were to try to wait another year?
It's, if you run the risk of you damage the pool, you spend money we don't have, or you push it and you damage the pool to the point where you're shutting down your swim program for a year plus time to replace both pools.
What happens during that time?
During that time, we'd have to do our best to try and find out 9th through 12th graders only a place to swim, because that's all we could possibly find. Because the issue with where we're currently located, there are no good swim options. Temple has a pool. We could probably possibly get our high school teams in over there. It would not be full practice times. It would be, we'd have to work around their schedule. Their pool is not very large. And most HOAs are not heated, so high school swimming, big times is January, February, that's when district meets are, and so we could be swimming outside when unheated pools, that's not really an option. So there's not really good options if you push it in something, and if you had to replace both pools, you're talking in the 3 million plus range.
If you don't have 400 grand, you don't have 3 million.
There you go.
So, I mean, I don't know how that things work at your house, but that's how money works at my house.
I have a wife.
Yeah, well, I'm just, y'all know me, I'm married to a girl that was on the inaugural swim team at Belton, and it's very dear to our family. And I would like to see us proceed with doing whatever we can so we don't have the potential of shutting that thing down for a year. Because I mean, it's a great program, and it could be so much greater in the future if we could ever get a facility that would, befit what we have here. And it would be such a huge impact to the greater community, filling that thing up about 35 times a year. But I think we need to get that thing fixed before it becomes a big problem. Because that is how it works at my house too.
Yeah. And I asked them point blank, I said, how long can we push it? Of course, they're not gonna tell me how long they think they can push it, because they don't be held to something, but.
So it is a community resource.
There's other people that use it besides us.
We could talk to other community entities about potentially helping. Doesn't mean they're going to.
Right.
But it is a community resource, so I think we may have to get creative, right? Because we know we can't use assuming a bond passed, we can't use any of that money, right? And so we would have to pass a bond, like another bond at some point to do it. And delaying something like this makes the cost go up exponentially, right? So getting creative about who we talk to, and do we talk to the city, do we talk to other entities about, this is a resource that our community needs,
I think that's a good question,
so.
and I think we could ask that.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know anybody that has cash flush around to do this, but that being said, it's not worth, it is worth asking the question.
Yeah, it's worth asking, right? Worst we can hear is no.
Sam, one quick question on this, is there, let's say we move forward with repairs, and, that would be a repair item that we would bring to you as a whole board and have you vote on. Let's say we move forward with repairs, is there a chance that we open up that liner in the summertime and find out that repairs are more significant than we thought?
There's a chance, yes.
Always that chance.
And so,
But you delay it a year, and that chance is even
Increase
bigger
even
and
bigger.
even more expensive, right?
so I share that
Yeah.
kind of publicly to share it right now, is there is a risk that we have by opening it up, that we could find a bigger problem than we even anticipate right now, that could impact our swim seasons, et cetera.
Sam, how long has it been since we noticed the bubble?
About 2 months ago, when we started asking for what's it gonna cost to fix it and what's going on, it was 2 months, because, galvanized pools are not the norm anymore. They were in 2006, now they're stainless steel. I'll be honest, I think me and Chris Moore were both under the impression that it was concrete underneath there, to be honest with you. And so, but that's when we noticed it, and we reached out to Progressive, and it's taken them, because it is you gotta get a specially pool liner, and they wanted to make sure they quoted it properly, and so it took them several months to get it, but, it's been 2-3 months.
I definitely think we need to try to handle it.
So we'll talk about it as a cabinet. There's a good chance that we could see that on the board agenda coming up here. And if that's the case, then we would ask for your approval, then we would have to work as a cabinet team to make some pretty significant changes to our remaining budget for the rest of the year.
Okay.
Everybody good?
That was the last item on our agenda.
Sure you don't want to talk about anything else?
I mean, I'll be glad to donate my salary to the pool repair.
Excellent. The board salary.
Board salary, exactly. Volunteering that, so it's, what is it, 5:40?
Yep.
We're done.